This is Euronews Tonight. Here are your top stories. President Zelensky says Russian forces have completely destroyed the eastern region of Donbass and describes the situation there as hell. The US accuses Russia of using food as a weapon of war in Ukraine and says the blockade of southern ports is holding global supplies hostage.
Hundreds of extremist audio clips have been removed from the streaming platform Soundcloud after a Europe-wide operation.
And star power in Cannes as Anne Hathaway and Anthony Hopkins take to the red carpet. We'll be bringing you all the latest from week one of the film festival. I'm Helena Humphrey. Good to have you with us. President Zelensky says that conditions in Ukraine's Donbass are hell as Russian forces intensify their attacks in the region. In his latest nightly address, Ukraine's leader said that the eastern region had been completely destroyed, accusing Moscow of indiscriminate shelling. Russia claims to have gained almost full control of Luhansk after heavy attacks on cities in Ukraine's east. Ukrainian officials say that Russia has stepped up its assault in Severodonetsk, where currently 15,000 people are holed up in bomb shelters. Zelensky says that the scale of destruction makes no military sense. Well, our international correspondent Annalise Borges is in Mykolaiv in southern Ukraine. We can cross over to her now. Good evening to you, Annalise. Good to see you. A stark statement there from the Ukrainian president saying that the Donbass has been completely destroyed by Russian forces. Of course, this is an important symbolic part of Ukraine. It's where the invasion began. Talk to us a little bit more about the significance of that part of the country.
It is a very significant part of Ukraine indeed. The Donbass has been the focus of a war that started some 8 years ago, back in 2014. Russian-backed separatists then continue fighting over control of the area, captured large swathes of territory, self-declare the Donetsk People's Republic and the Luhansk People's Republic. And from that point until earlier this year, the start of the year, more than 14,000 people had been killed. Since then, it has been a flagship, a flat point of this war, since Russia said that its military operation here in Ukraine would shift the focus to the Donbass. And for Ukrainian troops is also a very, very important point. They say they are not only going to be working towards recapturing territories such as Kherson, but also the Donbass and even the Crimean Peninsula annexed by Russia back in 2014.
Let me ask you this, Annalise. What next then for Donbass when, in President Zelensky's words, large parts of it have essentially been decimated by the Russian military? What does Russia intend for this region?
Well, Russian installed authorities have been asking Moscow to annex those parts of Ukraine. And we've heard, of course, about that visit by the Russian deputy prime minister who came to Kherson region, stating that the region had great prospects. Earlier, Moscow had said that Russia would be present there forever. We have managed to speak to people inside these occupied territories, most significantly inside Mariupol, and they described to us a very different city beyond the widespread level of destruction. They also talked about road signs and all kinds of advertising switched from the Ukrainian language to Russian. They also say they are being ordered to re-register their property if they don't want to face eviction from their homes. And those who wish to leave Mariupol right now, for example, are being ordered to go through a filtration camp, and that is for everyone, including women under the age of 60 and all men.
All right, our international correspondent Annalise Borges there reporting from Mykolaiv in southern Ukraine. Good to talk to you, Annalise. Do take care. Ukrainian defence forces in the besieged Azovstal steel plant have been told to give up the fight for the port city of Mariupol. Efforts to evacuate those still trapped in the plant are ongoing, and in a video message released today, the Azov commander said it is vital to rescue the most vulnerable.
Day 86 of the defence of Mariupol. The higher military leadership have given an order to save lives and preserve the well-being of the servicemen of the garrison and cease defending the city. Despite heavy fighting, defending while being encircled, and lack of resupplying, we kept reiterating the three conditions most important to us, namely civilians, wounded, and those who have been killed in action.
A Ukrainian medic who recorded remarkable footage of injured soldiers and civilians in Mariupol has reportedly been captured by Russian forces. Friends of Yulia Payevska, who's also known as Tyra, are praying for her safe return after her convoy was intercepted by troops in March. Mark Armstrong now reports.
A well-known Ukrainian medic who recorded her time in Mariupol on a small data card and managed to smuggle it out in a tampon has been captured by Russians. Yulia Payevska is known in Ukraine as Tyra, a gaming nickname. She wore a body camera and recorded her team's frantic efforts over 2 weeks to bring people back from the brink of death in the besieged city.
I believe she will return. We will do our best. Each of us will do everything to make sure they come back whole. She and her driver, who were captured together.
Tyra gave her footage to the Associated Press and was captured by Russian soldiers along with her driver the next day, March the 16th. Moscow has portrayed her as working for the nationalist Azov battalion, in line with the Kremlin's narrative that it's attempting to denazify Ukraine.
I cannot say that she is some kind of radical or Nazi. She, like a real medic, is apolitical and helps everyone who needs it.
Tyra is now a prisoner of the Russians, like hundreds of soldiers and civilians who've been kidnapped or captured. The UN monitoring mission says some may have been tortured and 5 were later found dead.
Before the war, Ukraine played a vital role in global food markets, and the recent fighting has seen a major disruption to the supply chain. This week, the UN warned it could lead to years of mass hunger and famine, especially in parts of Africa and the Middle East. Now, world leaders are hoping to persuade Belarus to help address the problem, as Catherine Berjikian reports.
The US and the UN are trying to negotiate a deal to transport grain from Ukraine through Belarus to a Lithuanian port to help world markets facing food shortages. As well as by rail, the UN Secretary General will meet with Russian, Turkish, and Ukrainian officials to organize a shipping lane. As an incentive, U.S. officials have told the Wall Street Journal that they are exploring a 6-month waiver of sanctions affecting Belarus's fertilizer industry. However, there are concerns about removing sanctions on President Alexander Lukashenko's regime. Washington's original measures were in response to the country using migrants to put pressure on the EU and its crackdown on its domestic opposition.
Our plan now is to exhaust regime as much as possible with derecognition, with political and economical isolation, and on the other side to support Belarusian people, media, civil society, organizations and initiatives that are fighting with the regime. So our aim is to make Lukashenko stop violence in our country, release all political prisoners, and start dialogue with Belarusian people, not with Western countries.
Despite these plans, some have argued that transporting the much-needed sunflower oil and grain by rail will only bring exports up to 10% of their pre-war levels.
We can bring in Jordan Cox now, who is a spokesperson for the World Food Programme, and he joins me from Rome. Good evening to you, Jordan. Good to have you with us. Just to begin with, to put this into perspective for us, thank you. How bad is the problem right now, and how bad could it get?
Well, right now we're facing a bit of a perfect storm. If you look at the numbers before Ukraine, what we call acute food insecurity, so people who are essentially marching towards starvation, those numbers were already at about 276 million people around the world, caused by climate change, COVID, spiraling costs, man-made conflicts. Add on Ukraine, and we're looking at a potential 47 million additional people affected by those ripple effects from the Ukraine crisis that could be marching towards starvation as a result. So it is very serious, and it's a very big global food crisis that we need to address now.
I mean, that risk of starvation, as you say, is very great. It's bad enough as it is, but I want to ask about the potential compound effects of that as well. Could we see resulting from this things such as social unrest, protests, for example, as well as migration?
Well, take a look at the previous crises, food price crises, let's say 2008 or 2011. Those had very serious social, political consequences, destabilization in lots of places around the world. The world was a very different place in 2008. You had no war in Syria, no war in Yemen, no war in Ethiopia, you had no COVID. Climate change was talked about at that time as a future thing that would come and cause problems for us all. Well, it's 2022, it's here now. So the context that the world is in at the moment is radically different and a lot less stable than it was in 2008. So to put a global food crisis of this potential magnitude, I mean, these are numbers we have never seen before globally. To put that on the world at this time could result in much worse consequences than we saw back then. So we need to do everything we can to hold that off now.
How do we do that? How can this situation be averted? And I'm talking about in the case of, say, for example, it's not possible to convince Russia to stop its blockade of southern ports. What happens then?
Well, the UN Secretary General, as you mentioned in the previous segment, is working with the political actors to see if that will be possible. I don't know exactly what will happen if that isn't, but I can give you a broader picture of what would happen globally in terms of the world. We're going to see, that 47 million number that I mentioned of people marching towards starvation that are on top of the 276 million already. That's a prediction based hopefully on the idea that eventually the war will end. If we have massive disruption to grain supplies, I mean, people find other sources. We purchase other sources on the market and stuff. But the issue is people are already facing some of the highest food prices in history right now. We know where that leads. And we know what the solution is. It's a relatively simple solution. It's not particularly easy to do. So the conflict needs to end so that we can open up those ports, so that Ukrainian grain and from the breadbasket of the world can get flowing again. The pressure on the markets needs to come down. People need to be able to afford food. We don't want to have a food availability problem next year, which is the kind of thing that we could be looking at if this continues to worsen in the current context. And finally, we're calling on the governments around the world and individuals to fund the shortfalls to humanitarian organizations like the UN World Food Program. We're preventing famine. We've done it in the past. We're fighting hunger. So we have shortfalls like we've never seen before, and we need the funding for that.
Jordan Cox, spokesperson for the World Food Programme, joining us from Rome. Thank you so much. Now, the former German Chancellor Gerhard Schröder has resigned from the board of directors at the Russian oil giant Rosneft. Schröder had faced criticism for keeping his position within the state energy company while Russia waged war in Ukraine. Now, on Thursday, the German government stripped its former leader of official perks. The EU followed suit by voting to sanction the 78-year-old. Following his resignation, Rosneft praised Schröder for contributing to large-scale infrastructure projects in Russia and Germany. The European Commission says it is monitoring the outbreak of monkeypox very, very closely after France became the latest EU nation to confirm cases of the virus. Health officials say that the risk to the general population is low, and US biotech firm Seeger Technologies told Euronews it already has an effective treatment against the disease.
Many of the animal studies we conducted as part of the approval process were done in non-human primates infected with monkeypox. And we've had the opportunity to use the drug in a number of compassionate cases in monkeypox patients. So I'm very optimistic this is going to be an effective drug.
Irish Foreign Minister Simon Coveney has warned that the UK against breaching international law over its plans to override the Northern Ireland Protocol. At a meeting with his British counterpart, Coveney said that London was trying to move the goalposts that it's agreed as part of its Brexit deal with the European Union. For more on this, we can go over to our correspondent, Shona Murray, who joins us from Brussels. Shona, you've been speaking to Simon Coveney after that meeting with his British counterpart, Liz Truss. Were you able to get a sense of how that meeting went?
Yes, Helena, actually, and he said it was blunt. He said he was clear and she was clear about their position, so there didn't seem to be any progress made on the substantive issues at that meeting. It seemed to be quite a hard meeting. But he made the point that some of the briefings coming from Downing Street and the UK government to the press and so on, being that the EU is being inflexible, he said that doesn't reflect reality. In fact, the EU is being very flexible, wants to sit down to negotiate the issues around the protocol. And he said that there is a landing spot where the EU's single market can be protected, the Good Friday Agreement can be protected, and that you could have a place where goods could freely move from Great Britain to Northern Ireland with as less checks as possible. Now, I asked him about one of the theories that's emerging from the UK government, that it's taking this unilateral action and making these threats against the EU at a time when the war is in Ukraine, meaning that other member states would be less likely to impose a trade war at the UK. And he said the opposite was true, in fact. He said his fellow colleagues, fellow ministers in the EU were very annoyed at what the UK is doing.
And what I would say is that I think that expectation from the British government has actually been turned on its head, because the ministers that I've spoken to are annoyed by what's happening here. Any suggestion that the UK may be using the war in Ukraine, because of course partnership is so important in the context of that war and Russian aggression, but any using of that crisis, which is a genuine international crisis that we all need to work together on, to try to create some kind of an environment whereby setting aside a treaty between, or elements of a treaty between the EU and the UK would somehow be acceptable, I think is a miscalculation, to put it mildly.
And that's Irish Foreign Affairs Minister Simon Coveney making the point that EU ministers and member states are annoyed with the UK making this threat against the Northern Ireland Protocol at a crucial time when unity, Western unity, is so important. Helena?
Shona, we also know, of course, that we've got that US delegation in Brussels right now. Of course, they're talking about Brexit. They're talking about the Northern Ireland Protocol. The US for a long time has been very clear that it is against a hard border on the island of Ireland. So where does this leave things now with the EU, with the UK?
Well, yeah, you're right. Richard Neal from the committee, the Ways and Means Committee, which is essentially the trade committee of the US Congress, they're in Brussels today. And they've been making the point, they've been meeting with Maros Sefcovic, Valdis Dombrovskis, the EU's trade commissioner, that the US has a strong relationship with the European Union, with the UK and with Ireland. And also, it was one of the most important partners in achieving the Good Friday Agreement in 1998, and so therefore has a vested interest in ensuring that peace on the island of Ireland is maintained through the Good Friday Agreement. And we heard from Richard Neal, you know, at that meeting today, where he's been saying that he wants to get the issue resolved, but the US has been very clear. We heard from Nancy Pelosi as well that there won't be a US-UK trade agreement if the British government continues to proceed in breaching international law and the agreement it made on the Northern Ireland Protocol when it left the European Union. Helena?
All right, our correspondent Shona Murray there in Brussels. Shona, as ever, good to talk to you. Thanks. Authorities in 6 European countries have conducted an operation to remove extremist content from the music streaming service Soundcloud. We can find out now more with Matthew in the Cube.
This is all part of the European Union's ongoing efforts to combat online terrorism and radicalisation. Now, Soundcloud is one of the world's most popular music streaming services. The German site allows users to upload, promote and share various audio clips. But like other big tech companies, it's also faced scrutiny in Europe for how it moderates the content that its users are allowed to hear. Well, in an operation and a joint partnership, Soundcloud has now worked with 6 European countries to remove hundreds of extremist audio clips and profiles. This is all according to the European Union's police agency, Europol. And some of the clips that were removed included jihadist chants that had been uploaded on Soundcloud in several languages, as well as various audio clips that promoted violent and extremist right-wing groups. Europol say that some of these clips had been targeted to try and recruit young people, and that some had been streamed several thousand times. In total, they say that around 1,100 clips and profiles have now been deleted after a large-scale operation that was led by federal authorities in Germany alongside officials in Denmark, Hungary, Portugal, Spain and the United Kingdom. And Helena, Soundcloud have said that as soon as these illegal audio clips were flagged to them, they were removed from the platform in breach of their clear terms and conditions.
All right, fascinating story. I had no idea about that. Matthew, thank you so much. The latest film by a Lithuanian director killed in Mariupol last month will be shown on Friday at the Cannes Film Festival. Mariupol 2, set in Ukraine's southeastern port city under Russian attack, is a last-minute addition to the lineup and looks at everyday life in unimaginable circumstances. The feature is to be presented out of competition and will be marked by a speech from Ukraine's President Zelensky. Well, our reporter Amaranta Zermenio has all the other news from the first week of the festival and sent this update from the Croisette.
There goes the first week of the Cannes Film Festival, but the competition is far from over. Movies like Armageddon Time with Anthony Hopkins and Anne Hathaway, or Hunt, the Korean movie directed by the Squid Game star Lee Jung-jae, already had their premiere. And today we're waiting for 3,000 Years of Longing from George Miller and Frères et Sœurs with Marion Cotillard to screen in the principal movie theater, the Grand Théâtre Lumière. This week's biggest moment was Top Gun Maverick, the sequel of an American classic starring Tom Cruise. And even though it's not competing, the movie even earned a fireworks show at the end of the night. But other than these Hollywood hits, the Cannes Film Festival has also been the place to shine the light on current subjects, such as the war in Ukraine. This week premiered Mariupol 2, the posthumous movie of a Lithuanian documentarist killed by the Russian army last month. However, the festival organization hasn't been running smoothly. There has been some serious saturation issues with the online ticket office, making it almost impossible for attendants to get a movie ticket. Some of them have to resort to standing in the last-minute access line for hours, or even begging for tickets outside the movie theaters. The festival team has already informed that they're working on fixing it, and hopefully, by next week, everyone will be able to enjoy the festival. Amaranta Cermeño from Cannes for Euronews.
We leave you now with a no comment from Dakar in Senegal, where a flurry of rhythms and sounds helped to open a festival of contemporary African art. Thanks for watching Euronews Tonight.